Good morning, everyone. My name is Andrew Wallace. I'm the Federal Member for Fisher and I'm the Chair of the Israel Allies Caucus in Australia. There are so many luminaries here today. I won't recognise all of them. There are a few people that I will recognise, but we are here to relaunch the Israel Allies Caucus of Australia. And there has never been a better time to relaunch such an important group. Now, for those of you who don't know what the Israel Allies Caucus is, I'll explain to you in a few short moments as to what we're all about. But can I take this opportunity to welcome His Excellency Amir Maimon, the Israeli Ambassador to Australia. I want to also single out Michael Ferguson, the State Member for Bass, and I'll have a little bit more to say about that in a moment. He is one of our Tasmanian caucus members. Dr Mike Kelly, my former colleague and the co-chair of Labor Friends of Israel. You are, like John the Baptist, a lone voice in the wilderness, but we love you nonetheless. Can I also thank the Senator, the Honourable David Fawcett, who is the co-chair of the Parliamentary Friends of Israel, for being here. Rabbi Isaac Riesenberg, where are you, Rabbi? Right there, great. The founding rabbi of the Central Shul and the founding rabbi of the Israel Allies Foundation of Australia. And you'll get to hear a little bit more about that in a moment. John Lockwood, where are you? Right there, great. David Jack on the camera. Errol Katz, where are you, Errol? Welcome. Stephen Green from the International Allies Foundation and the Southern Cross Alliance for Israel. Mark from International Christian Embassy. Where are you, Mark? Welcome. David from the AJA.
Oh, it's an apology.
An apology. Jeremy from the Zionist Federation.
And again, an apology.
So, look, I could be here all day. I do want to just give you an apology from the Leader of the Opposition, Peter Dutton. He was unable to be here this morning, but he sends his best regards. And, of course, the CEO of the Israel Allies Caucus in Jerusalem, Josh Reinstein, sends his apologies as well. So what is the Israel Allies Caucus? The Israel Allies Caucus, and I should also recognise the many members of Parliament who are here today. We have 35 members of the Israel Allies Caucus that are here today. Welcome, Senator James Patterson. And it goes to show just how strong support is in, I'm sorry, Mike, the coalition party room for the State of Israel, because that's what the Israel Allies Caucus is all about. It's about supporting the State of Israel and Jewish communities in our countries. Australia is the 51st country around the world, the 51st Parliament, to have the Israel Allies Caucus. The Israel Allies Caucus is not a parliamentary friendship group like what Senator David Fawcett leads, which is generally a bipartisan group. The Israel Allies Caucus, whilst it is welcome to all members of Parliament, we do tend to be a bit more boisterous in our support of Israel and the Jewish communities in our own countries. So we are one of 51 countries, 51 parliaments around the world that have this caucus. So we are part of an international organisation, and there's never been a more appropriate time for the relaunch of the caucus in Australia than what we are seeing today. Just this morning, we've seen the appalling video of 2 New South Wales health workers and the anti-Semitism that is spewing from their lips. And it is incredibly important that as faith leaders of all faiths and as parliamentarians that we single out anti-Semitism where and when we see it. And part of the great thing of this caucus is that it is open to 151 members of the House of Representatives and all senators to take that philosophy back to our electorates, to be shining lights. One thing I've learnt from the Rabbi is a Jewish phrase that all the darkness in the world cannot extinguish the light of one candle. And if we can be that one candle in our own electorates and in the Australian community, we will have done good work. I'm going to obviously talk a little bit about the appalling attacks on October 7 in 2023. That has given impetus to this organisation and the relaunch, and I should emphasise that this is a relaunch. We stand on the shoulders of giants. In Erica Betts, that was the first founding or parliamentary founder of the Israel Allies Caucus, I think going back to around about 2012, maybe even a little bit earlier. After that, it was Stuart Robert, and then I'm the third person. But it's because of October 7 that we have seen such strong interest, and I really want to thank my parliamentary colleagues for standing up and for speaking up for their support for the State of Israel. This morning we have still 73 hostages that remain in Gaza. And what we've seen over the last couple of weeks is the appalling state in the hostages that have been released. And it's incredibly important that we do our bit, both as parliamentarians and faith leaders, to keep the pressure up on Hamas and anybody that would seek to utilise or use these 73 hostages for political purposes. I had the, I won't say pleasure because it wasn't pleasure, but I had the, I should say probably privilege of going to Israel only 2 months after October 7. And I have to say that was a life-changing experience for me. To talk to families, to see the sights, the scenes of the atrocities. And I was with David Fawcett and a number of other colleagues that were on that trip. And it was life-changing. From a personal perspective, I'm not Jewish, I'm as Catholic as they come. But when I was in high school, I read Schindler's List in Year 12. And that was one of those defining moments for me as well, because when October 7 happened, I thought, well, what can I do to be like Oskar Schindler in some way? And this is my way of ensuring that never again, when we say never again, we mean never again. And Australia has been racked with anti-Semitism since October 7, and it's up to each and every single one of us to fight to ensure that we stamp it out. All right, now I am going to introduce you to John Lockwood, who is the chair of the Southern Cross Alliance for Israel. And John, you might like to say a little bit about your background to bring us here today, and I think you might have an announcement to make as well.
Thank you, thank you, Andrew, and wonderful to be with you today on this wonderful occasion. Great to see you, Mike, and many of you we know. As chairman of SCAFI, which is the Southern Cross Alliance for Israel, which we started in and around 2018 with the Rabbi over here, Rabbi Riesenberg, it was the purpose to bring Christian groups and Jewish groups together, not only to be seen together, but to stand together for our morals and values, our Christian Judeo upbringing that we felt was being lost in whatever political form, school and education. And so we gathered some 40 organisations, which represent some 300,000 to 400,000 Jews and Christians across Australia, from ICJ, members are here, Christians for Israel, Bridges for Peace. Then we had our Jewish organisations, Zionist Federation, the AJA, Peter Wertheimer, many of them coming together and saying, we will stand together. And so we started running a series of Zooms to introduce both politicians and technicians, people from Israel, the ambassador has been on a number of times, and just sharing about our common values and ethics and what it is to live here in Australia. We were a loose body, and so during the time, and particularly after October the 7th, we decided that we had to have a more legal form of a body. And in conjunction with working with Andrew, with this launch that has finally happened for the caucus, we formed the Israel Allies Foundation Australia as a non-for-profit DGR that's purpose is to support the caucus and help you with education, be a voice into our databases, which are quite large, and just a few of the objectives to promote or help control human behaviour that is harmful, abusive, for those who are suffering from anti-Semitism or anti-Zionism, to promote social cohesion amongst groups of Australians, Jews and Gentiles, and all colours. And we aim to do that by physical events, conferences, providing media, providing educational forms. And just to mention today, Norman and Barbara from the Indigenous Friends of Israel have told me they've just written courses for Year 5 and Year 6 to be introduced to schools on the history of why anti-Semitism has been risen. So we're working to get out to the public, but also supporting the caucus. And we'd love to be able in a year's time to send new members of parliament across to Israel with all the connections we have over there, so that you get to understand the day-by-day stuff, not what's read in the media. Because when you go there, as Andrew said, it's like, wow, we never see this side. And when I first went there, my history in real estate, I owned a company called Blackburn and Lockwood. I had very much a warped view of the Jewish people until I went there and I saw what they were doing and how they have been a blessing to many nations, which is what their call is for. So it's with proudness that we launch, not only relaunched the caucus, but we launched the Israel Allies Foundation Australia today, and a few of the directors are with us today, and the founding rabbi is with us today as well as part of that. So that's all you're going to hear from me. Back to you, Andrew.
Thanks very much, John. As I mentioned before, we're also joined by Rabbi Isaac Riesenberg, the founder of the Central Shul community and the founder of the Lantern Foundation, committed to building bridges of understanding between Christians and Jews. I'd like to invite the Rabbi to say some words. Please make him welcome.
Thank you so much. We'll manage. I'll just share a few words. In all my years in the rabbinate, I've never heard somebody say, "Rabbi, you spoke too short." Honourable Senators, His Excellency, friends and colleagues, I think first and foremost we need to give thanks to to Hashem, to God, who has brought us to this milestone of the relaunch of the Israel Allies Foundation, of Israel Allies Caucus and Foundation. I do want to give special thanks to my colleagues, to John Lockwood, to Errol Katz, Selwyn Heilbrunn, Mark Mudry, Professor Greg Rose, Doug Abrahams and George Collier, who have really put in tireless efforts and diligence to bring the foundation that was actually just launched on Monday. The events, the weeks and the days following October 7th have been difficult days for Israel, with an unprecedented onslaught of anti-Zionism and anti-Semitism in the media, the public arena and academia. There's a well-known adage that evil prospers when good men are silent. In this room, I'm pleased to say there are many good men. My dear friend Andrew Wallace, together with your colleagues. And may I say, you have not remained silent. Maybe you better take that away. You have not remained silent. You have spoken up. You have raised your voices in the media and in Parliament against the lies, against the untruths. You have spoken against this evil of anti-Semitism, and you've stood side by the Jewish people in their hour of need at their community events, in their rallies, and even coming to our synagogues where Andrew spoke. And you did not just pay lip service, but your words and your actions and your deeds came from your heart. They came from your soul, because these are your principles, these are your truths, and these are your beliefs that anti-Semitism is an evil that needs to be eradicated, that Israel has a right to defend itself against Hamas, and the Jewish people have a right to live in their biblical homeland. So thank you. Like many people in the Jewish community, after seeing the events of October 7th, I thought the world would clearly see what evil Israel must deal with on a day-to-day basis. Yet I was, together with others, was astounded that before the IDF even initiated actions there in Gaza, Israel was condemned. What was of great dismay to me of what I saw in Sydney, outside the Opera House, in the immediate aftermath of those days. For Australian Jews, it was an incredible shock. My parents, Holocaust survivors, came to this country in the 60s. I was a baby, came from Vienna, Austria. And I want to share with you just two stories. And I recall one bright sunny day walking on Bondi Road. My father had a short-sleeved shirt. You see, my father had on his left hand, he had two very large letters, ink tattooed, KL, concentration lager. This was put there by the Nazis to say that he was an inmate of the camps. He bumped into a colleague there on Bondi Road. He saw those letters there, and he asked my father, "What are the letters? What are these two letters?" And my father reflected for a moment, and he said, "An old girlfriend's initials." I was a young boy, and I looked at him. What are you talking about? The man had left. And he said to me, if I would have told him the truth, that we lived in an idyllic little town in Poland, one day evil men, Nazis, came, they herded us into ghettos. Then a few weeks later, they cramped us into cattle cars for 3 days without food, without water, without sanitation. They then unloaded us in camps, concentration camps, the elderly, the infirm. My parents were taken immediately and liquidated. And then, for the following 3 years, I was forced into the hardest of labour with inadequate food, clothing and protection in the cold of the winter, in the heat of the summer. If I would have said this to him, looking at this lovely blue sky in Sydney, Australia, he would have thought I was a madman. Or as he said in Yiddish, a meshuggah. He would have thought I was a crazy man. As my mother said recently, when they came here to Sydney, Australia, it was like coming to paradise. Coming to paradise. They'd left the virulent anti-Semitism there back in Europe. There were blue skies, sunny beaches and warm welcomes from the Aussies. Everybody was given a fair go. How the landscape has changed for Jews living in Australia. It's not the paradise of yesterday anymore, with anti-Semitic graffiti, harassment on the streets, cars being torched, synagogues being vandalised, a major terror plot with a caravan and the absolute horrific burning down of a synagogue in Melbourne, the Adass Israel Synagogue. I mean, truth be told, I do look a little bit Jewish, and I cannot say that in all the years living in Australia that I had experienced virulent anti-Semitism. But for me personally, it changed Friday evening, November the 8th, 2023, where at my synagogue in Melbourne, the Central Shul, a Palestinian mob had an issue, and they began marching towards our synagogue opposite Princess Park, and in the middle of the service we were forced to evacuate, and for the next 3 hours I heard the most anti-Semitic, anti-Israel, anti-Zionist diatribe and hatred that I'd ever heard, while the police stood by and did little. Our government's response to this anti-Semitism has been a twofold: verbal condemnations and increased security funding for Jewish institutions, and yes, there are new racial vilification laws. So let me tell you, when I need to go to synagogue every day, I am confronted by 25 bollards, because we are at the synagogues just near the footpath, so there shouldn't be a car ramming. On the Shabbat, there are multiple guards, most of whom are armed, on either end of the street. We've just got new security cameras, 5 on the outside, multiple on the inside, but now the security cameras actually go to the community security group. But the latest innovation is that security experts have deemed it was not appropriate that next time a mob comes, we go to the streets, so next time there is a mob, there is a button that automatically locks us in the synagogue until the threat has died. In Europe, they used to lock Jews in the ghetto for their protection at sunset. And I think all of us sitting here, and indeed all Australians, need to ask this question: is this what we want for our children? Where you need armed guards, multiple security cameras, bollards to protect you while you go to pray in a synagogue. Where children need guards and higher fences to protect them while they are learning in schools. When Jewish students at university are insulted and intimidated of what's happening in the Middle East. When if you wear a sign of your faith in public, you risk being abused and beaten. I say surely there must be another path, a different way, a better course than adding more security guards and higher fences. And if I may add, this must be the mission of the Israel Allies Foundation, to support the caucus and to stop the hatred and the anti-Semitism and bring social cohesion back to our society and restore those Judeo-Christian values which were the foundation of Australian society. If I may conclude with one other story, that when I arrived in Sydney, my parents enrolled me then at Bondi Public School, Bondi Road Public School on Wellington Street in the second grade. I dare say most of us have scant memories of what happened in grade 2. But one thing I do remember, our teacher, Mrs. Russell, before we went out to lunch, we took out our lunch and we said a prayer. God is gracious, God is good, and we thank Him for our food. Perhaps the time has come when we need to bring God back into the public arena, at very least with a moment of silence and reflection before a school day, to give people and children to understand that all men are created in the image of God and they must be respected. I conclude with those great words that God spoke to Abraham, that all those who bless you, you shall be blessed. And let me say, God's blessing is coming down in abundance in this room. Thank you.
For those of my colleagues that do need to go, you will see that they are coming and going during the proceedings. I'm not asking you to leave, that's fine. But there will be colleagues that will go in and out during the morning. Now, Westy, the media are going to be leaving us, I believe. Is that right? Where's Westy? Media's leaving us now.
Okay, yeah, that's right.
Yep. We're also joined by His Excellency Amir Maimon, who has served as the Ambassador of the State of Israel to Australia since February 2022. Retired Lieutenant, do you say Lieutenant in Israel or Lieutenant?
You can say general.
I was going to say retired Lieutenant Colonel, but clearly my intelligence is not as it should be. Ambassador Maimon has served in the UK, in Canada, Turkey, Ethiopia and the US as part of Israel's Foreign Service and helped to coordinate Operation Solomon in 1991, rescuing nearly 15,000 Ethiopian Jews. I'd now like to invite the Ambassador to the lectern. The Ambassador has been a very good friend of Australia, and I hope that we can say that you can say that Australia is a good friend of yours.
If there is one thing that I failed to accomplish is to bring my friends to call me Amir and not His Excellency. Everybody who knows me here in Australia know that I prefer my Hebrew name, Israeli name, which is Amir, and I think that I met each one of the people that is sitting here in this room, either yesterday or in your electorate, as I did with Terry and with Senator Andrew McLaughlin that live, and with Warren Winch in Keynes, and yeah, it is great to see you all here.
See you later, Amir.
All right. Yeah. So when I was appointed in October 2021, I met some of my very capable predecessors, and some of them were very capable. And, all of them say the same thing to me. Amir, there is no better place than Australia to prepare for your retirement. Today I can tell you that the last 3 years here, since I assumed my responsibilities, were all but a preparation for my retirement. But if there is one thing that I learned, and it takes me back to 1965, when I attended the second grade in elementary school in the city of Beersheba, a place that is well known here in Australia. So at that time we didn't have mobile phones, and the internet was not invented. So we were writing to each other memories. And I remember a memory that a classmate by the name Nurit Roman wrote to me. She wrote to me, Amir, not all those who show friendly faces can be referred to as friends. And not all that is glitter is gold. The gold can be tested in fire, and friends in a time of need. And during the last 3 years, I discovered by myself that not all those who show friendly faces were our real and true friends. Something that I can't say about the people that are sitting around this table, that are here today with us. And this is really an opportunity for me to thank you from the bottom of my heart, because Canberra can be cold, and not just because of the weather. And to have refreshing support, true support from the people that are here in the room is very, very meaningful. And once again, we say in Hebrew, Todah, thank you very much. Last but not least, every Saturday, Jewish people, after the reading of the Torah, recite a special prayer for the state of Israel. And since day number one, and without taking anything from the importance of the prayer for the state of Israel, and by the way, Jewish people also prayer for here in Australia for Australia, and to England when in UK, but without taking anything from the importance of the prayer, for me it's also very important to focus on promoting Israel, because Israel is not just about the challenges. Israel is not just about the war in Gaza, and Israel is definitely not just about the conflict. It's like if an Israeli diplomat or any other foreign diplomat will focus during his or her tour of duty in your beautiful country only on one aspect of life in Australia. And guess what? It will neither be the footy nor the cricket. So it's very important to praise and promote, because the glass is not, empty. The glass is fully, is also, half full. Yeah, thank you. It's the beginning. It's the relaunching, and it is also an opportunity to thank you, Andrew, for your leadership in a time when Israel was criticized. It was a refreshing wind to read your messages and statements about the just war that we are facing, not since October the 7th, but since the inception of the State of Israel. And it's still going on. It's not over. Our hostages are still kept in dark tunnels in the Gaza Strip. I do hope that we'll see as many, hostages alive as possible. I have all the reason to believe that the future photos and images that will come from our region will not be as cheerful as the previous one, even if they were skinny, and even if it took us back to the scenes from the Second World War. I have all the reason to believe that quite a high number of our hostages is no more alive, and I hope that their families, their beloved ones in Israel that are waiting, will be able to reunite with them, in the near future. But if you're following the news, you probably understand that at the moment it's a very tense situation. And I'm not that sure if on this coming Saturday, the Hamas will stand behind the agreements and their commitments as it is agreed when we signed the deal. So once again, thank you very much. It's great to be here, and I'm looking forward to continue with our personal relationship and to see you whether here or in your electorates. It's also an opportunity to mention my dear friend Mr. Ferguson just came especially for this event from Tasmania. I just visited Tasmania. I had the wonderful and a moving dinner with John and with, you mentioned Senator Abbott's, Minister Abbott's now, and also the Attorney General, Guy Barnett, the Deputy Premier. We have friends. And this is the time to speak up. This is the time to show your friendship. And for me, this is yet another opportunity to thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.
Thank you, Your Excellency. I want to share with you in closing something that really impacted upon me in my visit to Israel in December of 2023. And before we left, Amir showed us the 43-minute video of some of the body cam of the atrocities that took place on October 7. Now, I wish I never saw that video because it has been indelibly inscribed into my memory. And people say to me, oh, should I watch the video? And my advice to them is, unless you really need to watch it, my advice is don't watch it. Because the graphic, murderous rampage that took place on October 7 will never leave me. And one thing that the media never talk about is when I was at Kfar Aza in December of 2023, and I was walking around the ruins of people's homes, and we had a guide, a young Israeli IDF lieutenant who was guiding us through the kibbutz. And every single building had been destroyed. The doors had been kicked in, the windows had been shot out. One house that I walked into, clearly a fragmentation grenade had been thrown into the house. There were pockmarks on the walls, the ceilings. And one thing that Australian media never talk about, and I'm going to give them this challenge for those that are here today, is that on October 7 there were two waves into southern Israel. There were the waves of Hamas militants that came in, killing, raping, abducting 251 people, killing 1,200 people. But what happened after that murderous rampage is not reported on. And I don't know why. What happened after that murderous rampage is that civilians came in from Gaza into places like Kfar Aza, and they stripped every conceivable valuable from each of those homes. Air conditioners, televisions, radios, ovens, you name it, it was stripped. They would have been stepping over the bodies of those Israelis to do that. What they also don't talk about, which I want to encourage them to do so, is to go back and look at that 43-minute video and see those Israeli hostages being literally thrown into the back of utilities, four-wheel drive Hilux utilities, literally thrown into the back. Most were badly injured, wounded, bloodied, beaten, raped, and they were thrown into the backs of these utes and driven into Gaza, only a very short distance away from where they were taken, to the scenes of jubilation by Palestinian civilians. Why is that not talked about? Now, I'm not saying that all Palestinians are bad people, but clearly the Palestinian civilians that are shown on these videos, delighted, were jubilant about the most appalling atrocities that occurred on October 7. And that's something that we should never forget. Can I thank you all? Can I thank my colleagues for being here? Your presence demonstrates to these good people from all around this country that our parliamentarians across the country, not just in the federal parliament, but in our state parliaments as well, that we will not forget, that we will not leave our Jewish friends behind, and that we will continue to fight for the State of Israel and Jewish communities in our own electorates. Can I thank you for coming? Can I thank our special guests, John Lockwood, the Rabbi, and His Excellency, I'm going to keep saying it because I know it annoys him, Amir, you are a good friend. And I do want to single out once again Mike Kelly for the continuous work that you do and that Michael Danby does in trying to elevate this important cause in the Labor Party. You are lone voices in the wilderness, and we thank you for the work that you do in particular. Can I invite you to remain? We have the room for another 15 minutes. Help yourselves to some tea and coffee and some refreshments. Thank you once again. Good morning. Well done. Thanks, mate. Well done. Oh, you're in Brisbane. Right. Sure. Can I just suggest that anybody who wants to be a part of some photos, and so that's all the politicians, can I suggest that we gather around here? And for everybody else, anybody else that wants to be in the photo, you are most welcome.
All right. Here we go. Looking here at this camera, please, everyone. Here we go. 1, 2, 3. Beautiful. Any other cameras? One here, please.
Just one over here, thank you.
Well, thanks very much for coming. My name's Andrew Wallace. I'm the Federal Member for Fisher. I'm also the chair of the Israel Allies Caucus Australia. The Israel Allies Caucus of Australia is being relaunched today. It is one of 51 organisations around the world, 51 parliamentarians, 51 groups of parliamentarians that support the State of Israel and Jewish communities in our respective countries. It is so incredibly important that That's all right, no worries. It's so incredibly important that Australian parliamentarians, both federal and state, come together and demonstrate their support for the State of Israel and Jewish communities in our respective electorates and states. Israel needs all the support that it can muster at this time. and it's incredibly important that Australian parliamentarians take that stand up for the State of Israel. And I'm very proud to say that the Israel Allies Caucus of Australia now has 35 members of Parliament around Australia.
There's a distinct lack of Labor, sitting Labor MPs around this function. Are there members of the Federal Labor Caucus who are part of this caucus? And are you upset that they're not here to sort of show support? Or do you think it's too hard for them?
Well, I think it's disappointing that there are no members of the Labor Party in the Israel Allies Caucus of Australia. I want to single out Dr. Mike Kelly, who and also Michael Danby, who are both former members of Parliament for the Labor Party. They have been in the past and remain strong, staunch supporters of the State of Israel and Jewish community members in Australia. It's disappointing that no current members of the Labor Party have chosen to join the Israel Allies Caucus. As to why they haven't done that, those questions are probably best left to them.
What's the difference between there's a parliamentary friend in Israel group, so what's the difference and why do we need this extra?
Yeah, it's a really good question. The parliamentary friendship group is generally bipartisan. It's generally one that tends to support a group, in this case it might be the State of Israel, but do it without rocking the boat. The Israel Allies Caucus is an international body. It's not a friendship group that is within falls under the guise of the presiding officers, as all the other friendships groups do in Australia. It's one in Australia. It's one of 51 parliaments around the world. It's an international body. It's not a group that falls within the guise of the Australian Parliament. Why? As to why we need it, because parliamentary friendship groups, by their very nature, walk a fine line between not being critical of the government of the day, and unfortunately, this government has abandoned Australian Jews and has abandoned the State of Israel to such an extent that, as the chair of this caucus, I've had to be very vocal in my comments and my statements and my media releases about what this government has done and what it has failed to do in relation to Israel. So, back to your question, it doesn't come as any great surprise that members of the Australian Labor Party haven't joined the caucus, because the caucus has been very critical of this government.
Mr. Wallace, there's been videos that have surfaced over New South Wales making comments saying that they've obviously been stood down. What's your reaction to seeing that kind of video, knowing that people have that kind of reaction?
Well, my immediate reaction was that it was fine. If you had told me 2 years ago that this is where we would be in 2025 in Australia, I wouldn't have believed you. The level and depth of anti-Semitism in this country has shocked me, and I have to say, it's not just on the left side of politics. You've got the far left, but you've also got this far right as well. So you've got the extremities of Australian politics, and those people that tend to gather in those environments, spewing out the most vile hatred. And as a lawyer, everybody should have the right to be presumed innocent until proven guilty. But from the video that I have seen, causes me great concern about the comments that were made about not only would we not treat you, but we would kill you if you were an Israeli coming into a New South Wales hospital. I think that the New South Wales state government leadership has been very strong on this point. I welcome the comments by the New South Wales Health Minister. I haven't heard the comments from Chris Minns, but I assume that they are equally as condemning. Chris Minns has been very strong in his condemnation of anti-Semitism of late. I think that part of the reason why we are here today in 2025 is the appalling lack of political leadership that we have seen going right back to October 9 on the steps of the Sydney Opera House. If people can get away with saying, the comments that they made about Australian Jews on the steps of the Opera House, that emboldens others to continue to push the envelope. People will think that there's no consequences. I think if there had been consequences for those individuals on October 9 on the steps of the Opera House, I think we'd be living in a different Australia today. I do, having said that, I welcome Chris Minns' leadership, more recent leadership on this issue. I lament the fact that the Prime Minister continues to show extremely poor leadership. It's one thing to merely mouth statements, but the actions of this government have been appalling, particularly both domestically and on the international stage in the United Nations.
Sorry, last question. Mr. Wallace has to go.
So you introduced anti-Semitism in place. A number of measures have been put in place, not for example, what is that?
Well, the coalition has been very strong in its position on this. We believe that that we need to have those mandatory minimum sentences. The federal government, the Labor government, was dragged kicking and screaming on mandatory minimum sentences. We know where the Labor Party stand on that, but they obviously have sniffed the political breeze. I think that what's been clear is that our law enforcement agencies across the country need to get some very clear political leadership, as quite frankly as we are now starting to see in New South Wales. When political leaders stand up and say this conduct is absolutely unacceptable, and if you partake in this behaviour, you will be prosecuted. We will find you, we will prosecute you, and the penalties that you will endure will be significant. And that is the purpose of why the coalition went down the path of these mandatory minimum sentences. And I'm pleased that the federal government's finally got on board. But to me, it's all about political leadership, and that political leadership will flow down to our leadership of our law enforcement agencies. I've got no qualms or problems with the police on the beat. They are following orders of their senior leadership, and until very recently, that senior leadership has been very poor, very lacking on anti-Semitism, and I welcome the change of heart.
Trump plans to use take over guns. Are you supportive of the idea as well for terrible caucus, and how are you satisfied with how that
Voice two questions, quick cheeky, but look, just like the coalition, I am of the view that a long-term peaceful resolution of the dispute in the Middle East can only be achieved through a two-state solution. That means that there can be no situation where one group, whether it's Israel or the Palestinians, are removed from their homeland. The President of the United States is the master being able to change the paradigm of discussions. You know, there is some debate as to whether there's going to be what the President's put forward is a permanent removal from Gaza or whether it's temporary. I think ultimately what the President is trying to do is force an outcome on what has been an intractable dispute for many decades. You know, the best form of insanity is, you know, keep doing on what you've always done, expecting a different result. So I think the President is trying to inject a different paradigm, and I think that his comments are very likely to result in a different outcome.
I think the main purpose that we found out during even the last five to 7 years since we started SCAFI is the general unawareness of both the history of Israel and the people of Israel, how it's led the world in technological and wonderful things, how it's been a blessing. You asked Andrew a question about a health issue that has erupted. If you were with me in Israel, I could take you to many medical centres where they've set up to handle their enemies. They bring them in. They rebuild them at Hadassah Hospital. They bring the Lebanese Hezbollah into the hospital and rebuild them. And down at Hebrew University, they have a special section for Palestinian women who have trouble with labour. So they are the most giving of people. You wouldn't hear anybody being rejected. And that's the side of Israel and its people that we don't see in the modern media. We don't hear these stories. We don't hear how they're the first medical team into every disaster situation in the world. They have special forces that go straight into tsunamis and all those sorts of things. So, as part of SCAFI and now the Israel Allies Foundation, we want to put education. We want to inform not just the politicians, but then the politicians, their members, their residents where they are, so that there's a more balanced view than what we've received over the last couple of years, in particular since the 7th of October.
What do you think is behind the rise in anti-Semitism in Australia?
The Rabbi might say, my observation on that is there seems to have been, over the last 20 years, a very much rise in the educational programs through schools and universities of what we'd call the left woke type of teaching. And this misinformation that we as white Australians were colonialists and took over everything, and the accusations that have been made over the many wonderful things that we have done together with our brothers, etc. So this increase, from my perspective, is twofold. One, it's been taught. It's a popular thing, for some students to get on board with, because anything that's against the regime is against the regime. I personally remember walking in the against Vietnam. We were all conscripted many years ago. So sometimes they just want to get on board with something there. But I think there's also another element which we would call the increase of evil, in essence, and the increase of teaching, or the ability for some of the elite of the world to say they want to get rid of a number of people in the world. So it's twofold.
On a positive note, what we want to do is, as well, I believe there is a silent majority of Australians that are horrified by what is going on. And one very moving moment for me was that when they had that terrible fire at the Das Israel congregation. It was early Friday morning. I'd come out of my synagogue service, must have been 8 o'clock. There's a lot of traffic because Central Shul is opposite a parkland, it's next to a gym. As soon as I stepped out of the synagogue, a woman comes over to me. He said, "Rabbi, I am not Jewish, but what happened there at the Das synagogue, the burning, was horrific. This is not the Australian way. This is not the Australian way." And this is something that I personally want to foster. We've been very encouraged. There have been statements by major churches just in recent weeks and months, by the Catholic Diocese, the Anglicans condemning anti-Semitism. And here too, our synagogue, Central Shul, has taken a very proactive step. On February 28th, the local Anglican parishes are joining us at our service. We expect over 100 people from their congregation, and we're joining together and having a Shabbat meal with them in the hall. And last week, St Andrews in Brighton put on their video display cabinet that anti-Semitism is wrong, and we've got to speak up. That's what we need. As I said previously, evil thrives when good men are silent. We've got to speak up. Anti-Semitism is not just a Jewish problem, and that's why it's so important that we've got Christians and Jews working together to combat this.
Sorry, I'm probably going to go now more down the negative track. This morning there seems to have been some videos from two New South Wales health workers that essentially showing them saying on camera that they would not treat Israelis if they came into the hospital. They said a bunch of other things that were quite offensive and frightening. What is your reaction to something like that? That there would be people in the health system here in Australia who use so extreme that they would use to treat Israelis?
I think that's horrific. I think if they're nurses, they need to, notwithstanding their personal views, they've got professional ethics, and I'll leave that to politicians in New South Wales to deal with them, but I think this is horrific. It's just illustrating what's happening. The reality is, as I mentioned earlier, my parents are Holocaust survivors. I came here as a child, and my mother says when she came to this country in the 60s, it was like coming to a paradise, leaving behind the virulent anti-Semitism of Europe and the hatred in return to a wonderful country of blue skies, sand and beaches. Everybody was given a fair go. That's the Australia that I grew up in. And yes, we have differences, but we need to respect each other.
Do you think that video is reflective of something that is running through the Australian culture at the moment?
I personally don't think so. I think Australians, on balance, are good people. As I shared the story, and this was again brought home to me when the Das Israel was burnt down in Melbourne. One of the most moving things I saw, as the builders put up their hoarding, many people came, non-Jews in particular, put flowers there, put messages there, how horrified they were. And I know for a fact they've got an appeal now. There's participation by the broader community, because anti-Semitism does not just affect Jews, it affects all of Australian society, and that's what we've got to be cognizant of.
Can you describe, please, how your life has changed since October 7th, and also whether you believe that if the ceasefire in Israel holds, that the situation here might come down?
I can comment how my life has changed. I'll leave the ceasefire to wiser men. Last week I was in Sydney. I have two grandchildren. I took them to school. So before 2 blocks away from the school, in the morning and the afternoon, there were already volunteer security guards from the community security group. Just so happens that 2 weeks ago, 2 blocks down the road, a perceived community member's car was torched. and his whole house was dabbed with red paint. As I bring the children closer to the school, I'm confronted that they didn't know who I was. Who am I? And I have to identify myself. On top of that, there's a pillbox before you can enter in with guards. I'm talking about children going to school. That's what they have to deal with. In my synagogue now in Melbourne, 25 bollards, multiple security cameras that now go, as of last week, go directly to the community service group, and now an added feature was added in that because on November the 8th, a Palestinian mob came marching towards the synagogue. There was a forced evacuation that was deemed inappropriate. So now we have a special remote button that will lock us all inside the synagogue to protect us from the mob. This is very reminiscent of the ghettos in Europe, where Jews were locked in their ghettos at night for their own protection. I mean, the question is for all of us, is this the Australia that we want? Where children, where people go to synagogues and have to be protected, where children go to school and the fences get higher and higher, where students go to academia to learn and they are confronted with abuse. When people of faith, if I wear my kippah, insults are hurled towards me. I don't believe the vast majority of Australians want this. And it's important that this silent majority speak up, and I think that's something through our efforts that we need to encourage, and thank God I've seen that, particularly through the good actions of the church.
And do you think the situation will calm down if the ceasefire votes in the Middle East?
Middle East is a very volatile area. It's something we cannot predict, but we all hope and pray for a long-term, peaceful and just resolution for all parties.